but yeah, man, it was mountain biking is a lot of fun, and so yeah, kind of it's ironic how Ardmore's played into the conversation so much so far.
So early. It's a small world.
Yeah.
I have the Disney song going in my head now.
Yeah.
Well, just a real quick intro, since we've been chatting a little bit, and nobody knows. Hey, who's here and what are we talking about? Welcome to the latest episode of Shiftless, and we're excited to do another what we call an expert episode. Just to give you a little bit of background, James, the premise of our podcast is Brad and I just like to shoot the shit with each other and pretend like we know what we're talking about. And every once in a while we start talking about things and go, you know what? Instead of me just faking this, let's bring on somebody who knows what they're talking about. So, for those that are listening today, we have James Wilson from Pedaling Innovations. And Brad, if you would be so kind, can you give an outline of our conversation that led to inviting James to join us?
I think I just told you how he was kind of the catalyst for me jumping into flat pedals after riding with him and having an extended conversation with him. And I was just telling you, James is the one that told me the exact same things I regurgitated to you about, the pedal's important, but the shoe is important as well. And just your points of contact and how grippy and the stack height and all of those kind of things, how they played in. It's not just go get a set of platform pedals and wear your Vans and have a nice day. I'm sure James, has a lot more detail and info about that than I do, but that was before, I think that was right when you were doing a lot of studies and stuff coming out with, the efficiency misconception of clipless versus flat pedals and how everybody acts like, oh, well, I get so much more when I pull and from a clipless pedal. And you were kind of breaking down how that was not as big of a deal as everybody was making it out to be. To me, like I said, it's been probably 8 years since we had that conversation. But anyways, and now he has his own pedal company, Pedaling Innovations, and I've regretfully still have yet to put on a pair of those pedals and try them out. But what's funny is my buddy, I was just in Santa Fe a couple of weeks ago at Britt Tucker's house, and he had a pair of your pedals on. And the one thing I want to get into about your pedals that I was blown away about is, I know now you have two different sizes, but what I'm really infatuated with is the bearing construction on those, because I spun those pedals and was absolutely floored at how smooth they were. And like he said, he's had them for, I want to say 3 years or something, and never ever jacked with them, and they were just as smooth as any pedal I've ever seen in my life. It reminded me of old loose ball campy stuff. That's how incredible it was.
No, that's an interesting point. Yeah, we definitely get into that later, because that is something that we get a lot of feedback from the pedals, like people talking about how the Catalyst pedals last longer, and the design tends to not put as much stress on the bearings and stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, it's been a kind of a long, interesting journey, kind of even getting to the point where I have my own pedal company. I think back, when we met and rode and talked, there was, so my deal in this whole like flat pedal thing is kind of funny, because I got into it in a weird way. Like I never set out to be like the flat pedal guy. Like I was a strength coach who ended up working with a couple of high level riders, and one of them in particular, Aaron Gwynn. I was his original strength coach when he started mountain biking, and I worked with him before he was Aaron Gwynn, before anybody knew who he was. And then when he got on with the Yeti World Cup team, I continued working with him, and then started working with the whole team. And a couple things happened that kind of sucked me into this whole flat pedal thing. And one was that I was doing an interview or just kind of having a conversation with Aaron, and I forget if it was a blog post or a podcast or something, but Aaron made a statement about how like in downhilling, flats make you better and clipless make you faster. And I thought nothing of that. I thought like, well, that's a pretty, rational thing to say. And just my own experience, with flat pedals up to that point and seeing how like, yeah, like you can get really, really good on flat pedals and they do kind of force you to be better. They make, you can't get away with some of the things you can on clipless pedals. And in a racing situation where, you want to be more secure, then like maybe they can make you faster. And so I thought nothing of that, but like, man, the pushback that we got to that statement, there was a lot of people who were like, man, I'm surprised you saying this and, clipless are better and all this stuff. And so I found myself having to like, not having to, but like defending, because like I understood what he was saying and I believed in it too. And so I was defending what he said as far as like why flat pedals there's a misconception about them and how you can actually get really, really good on them and stuff. And so that was really kind of my first foray into realizing like how, cult-like, I guess, like the thought process around clipless pedals can be. And it's very iconoclastic. It's black and white, right? Like clipless good, flats bad. And any suggestion that flats may be good or even better in some situations is met with a lot of pushback. And like I said, that really kind of surprised me. But as I got into it more, I started to realize that, yeah, like people really get tied into this idea of the need to ride clipless pedals. And there is a little bit of a like, well, wait a minute, like, you convinced me that these things were better. I went through the process of learning how to use these things, which is usually a painful process, right? Like that's the thing is people don't like to talk about, like, you're going to fall over, you're going to get hurt. There are going to be times when you crash and you can't get unclipped or you get unclipped a little late, and it is going to affect the severity of the crash, right? Like these things do add up. And so there's this learning curve that people go through. It's almost like this rite of passage, right, that you go through to become a real mountain biker. You start out on flats when you starting out beginner, right? But like when you want to become a real mountain biker, you need to switch to clipless pedals. And then there's this, like I said, this process that you go through to do it. And then you come out the other end, and then you got some freaking jerk over here who's telling you did all that for nothing. Right? Like you really don't need the clipless pedals. Like in fact, you may have learned some bad habits and actually kind of like set yourself back as a rider in some ways. For a lot of riders, their skills get frozen in time at the point when they switch to clipless pedals. Like they find it very hard to continue to progress their skills. That's why, pretty much every skills coach now will tell you, like, you need to learn new skills and get better and practice your skills. You need to do it on flat pedals. But again, like 8, 10 plus years ago, when I started riding 20 plus years ago, like that was not part of the conversation. Like flat pedals were looked at as this thing that like, we're so much better and so much superior to flat pedals. And like I said, just, the other thing that happened is I started looking into the research behind clipless pedals. And again, the reason I started looking into it was because I wanted to learn how clipless pedals work so I could make programs that enhance what they did. Right, because I'm working with Aaron Gwynn, I'm working with the Yeti World Cup team. These guys ride clipless pedals. So what exactly do the studies say about clipless pedals? What exactly does the science say? Like as a strength and conditioning coach, don't I owe it to my athletes to understand what the science actually says so I can see if there's something that I can do to help enhance what they're doing or however this works, right? And so, but that's when I started to realize and looking at the science that there's not only a lack of evidence that clipless pedals are superior to flat pedals, there's actually some suggestions that a lot of stuff that we're told, like the need to pull up on the backstroke and, the need to push through the ball of the foot, like all of these things, when they actually study them, are shown to either not matter or actually create worse outcomes than just using like a natural pedal stroke with more of a balanced foot position. And so, anyways, yeah, man, it's been, I wrote the Flat Pedal Revolution Manifesto, which is actually a collection of a bunch of things that I put together. People can still Google it. And, but the cool thing is at this point, a lot of people know these things that when I put in that thing a decade plus ago were not common knowledge. And now you fast forward and you see like, man, flat pedals are way more accepted in mountain biking culture than they were. And I'd like to think that my efforts had some, effect in that. Although there's a lot of people that have definitely helped with getting that information out there. But so yeah, I guess that's kind of a monologue for you guys on how I kind of got into this and kind of some of that background information. But yeah.
Well, in my mind, I think you were kind of at least a big flag holder for flat pedals. I mean, like I was telling Kevin, like as soon as we started talking about flat pedals, boom, James Wilson pops into my head. And like I said, the conversation that we had immediately, I just started replaying it. And I just looked at my phone, and I was under exaggerating. It was 2012 when I was out there riding with you.
Okay.
And I was fresh off of Dirty Kansas, so I came out there with some clean legs, and I was on a single speed. And you were like, man, I don't know why you brought a single speed out here, but you drugged me all around, and we had a great ride.
I think you were the dude who changed my perspective on what people could do on a freaking single speed. To be honest with you, I remember you, man. Like, yeah, I remember like, cause like you weren't obviously, you weren't as fast as I was on a full suspension and knowing the trails, but man, you weren't like just way behind. You know what I mean? Like I remember being surprised, like, wow, like, this is not as big a difference. Like all this fucking technology that I have underneath me here is really not making that big of a difference. Although I still like it, and I still, I never went to a single speed myself, but
you're not single speeding now, are you?
No, you didn't convince me that much, but I remember that ride, man. And so, but yeah, no, man, yeah, that was. It's been a long time, man. It's been a long time that I've been kind of doing it, and it has cost me again. Like now, it's not as big a deal, but man, I definitely, cost me position and relationships in the mountain bike industry with my stance on flat pedals and being very vocal about it. Like it is not. You're not, the most popular guy at the party when you walk in and you start telling everybody that their clipless pedal guy is dead, right? Like that's not, and so there's a lot of money behind clipless pedals. I've had, conversations that just blow my mind, right? Because that's the thing is people don't, if you don't peel back the cover right at the top and see like what's going on underneath, like open the box, right? Like, so you just see the mountain bike industry and you see these things coming out of it, right? And it's like, well, let's open the box and see, well, what's really going into what's coming out of this thing. And you realize like, man, there's a lot of advertising dollars going into this. There's a lot of ego that goes into this. Like it's not a bunch of people who are sitting around who are just looking for the absolute best thing and best solution for you as a mountain biker and for us as a mountain biking culture, and then putting that out there, right? Like that's not what's going on here. They're like it's the inputs that go into it. Like again, the advertising dollars play a big role, right? Because like websites, right? Like I had a conversation one time with the old editor at Pink Bike. And I was doing this story on how Trek had this sticker. They may still have it on their freaking bikes. I don't know. But Trek literally had a sticker on their bikes, on the crank arms of the bikes that they shipped out, that said that this bike is to be equipped with pedals that have a positive retention device, like such as clipless pedals or toe clips. Right? And like they're saying like right there that like do not put flat pedals right on this bike, that this bike is not or isn't designed for or not safe with, or like it says on the crank arm that this bike is not to be used with flat pedals. And I start like looking into it and trying to figure out like what was going on. And you can still like, I got the post on bikejames.com if anybody wants to go back and read it. It's like, why does Trek have an anti-flat sticker on their bikes? But at the time, I was actually talking to Pink Bike about them running the story, because like, why does one of the major bike manufacturers in the world have this sticker on their bikes? And they decided they weren't going to run the story. And I basically was told that it's like, look, man, we know clipless pedals are oversold, and we know they're kind of a problem. But like saying something isn't going to do anything, and it's just going to piss people off.
And they're going to lose advertising dollars.
Dude, I was fucking blown away. You know what I mean? Like this is literally coming out of the mouth of like, and this is what drives these websites. Like if you piss off Shimano, right? Like you start saying a bunch of like anti-clipless rhetoric and stuff, and then Shimano decides like, man, we're gonna not advertise as much, or they're not going to advertise clipless pedal stuff with you or whatever. And so that's advertising dollars. And so people are beholden on some level to their advertisers. It's like anything else, right? We talk about like how big, media, corporate media is owned by the pharmacy advertising dollars and stuff like that. So the thing is like every industry is like this. Just the thing that's funny is when people think like the mountain bike industry isn't subject to these same forces for some reason, right? And they're subject to the same forces that everything else is. And so like a lot of what's driven clipless pedals has been some of these sources. It's not because clipless pedals are better. It's because there's money in them. There's advertising dollars behind them. There's a lot of things that go into it. And so yeah, it's like I said, when you look at it objectively, the conclusions start to potentially be a little different, right? I think that if more, and that's always been what I've said is like I just want people to know the truth, right? Like don't believe me, check what I'm saying. Right? Check the studies, check the stuff. Like do your own research and then come to your own conclusion. But, don't just believe what, the mountain bike industry is telling you about the need to ride clipless pedals because it's simply not true. And again, I think it's like way better understood now than it definitely was like, 10, 20 years ago, which is awesome because I think that, unfortunately, we lost a lot of riders along the way. Like I had conversations with people who told me that like they quit mountain biking because they got tired of crashing with clipless pedals and not being able to get unclipped. And to them, the thought of going to flat pedals was like, that's not even an option. Like my only other option is to quit riding, right? It's like, if I'm not willing to deal with clipless pedals, I may as well quit riding because I'm going to be so terrible and have such a bad time on flat pedals that it's not going to be worth the effort. And it's like, then I have a conversation like I did with them. And then they try flat pedals and they tell me like, hey, holy shit, I love mountain biking, right? But like, how many riders did we lose and are still losing on some level to this like insane push to have people get on clipless pedals when they don't necessarily need to for any real performance or fun or technical reason? If you're not paying your mortgage based on your performance on a mountain bike, then you really probably don't need clipless pedals. Like it just doesn't make a big enough difference for you to worry about that, right? So anyways, yeah, that's my kind of stance on it or thoughts.
I think about the majority of people that equip their bike with clipless pedals don't go get a proper fit either, which is way more important when you're running clipless versus a flat pedal. I can't even begin to think of how many people I know that have overuse injuries, knee injuries, and all these issues because they're running clipless pedals and they're locked into that position. But the one thing I was going to ask you is clipless pedals versus flat pedals. Are you, and I don't mean it this way, James, so don't take it this way, but are you that much of the flat pedal just advocate that you think that flat pedals are best in every case across the board, like road biking, cross races, downhill, triathlons? Yeah, that's my question. Is it everything?
Yeah.
I mean, could you see a huge transition to clipless and BMX now, which is an interesting point, and they sincerely think that they're way more efficient on BMX, and then not to mention the connectivity to the bike. But I'm just curious. Sorry, I asked the question. I'll let you answer. No.
It's a good question, right? And so here's the deal. I will preface this by saying that one of my favorite just kind of quotes or thoughts from one of my mentors in the fitness industry is that using the words always and never shows a lack of critical thinking skills. Right. So like I hate to use the word always and never. I think that if you have critical thinking skills, you can probably think of a scenario and a situation where something would be more beneficial than it would in most other situations. Right. And so I do think that clipless pedals potentially have a place in that. So this kind of actually like segues into a little bit of like the Catalyst pedal. And the pedal that, the reason that I started a flat pedal company, right? So I was the flat pedal guy, excuse me, for forever and had no product. I had no dog in the race. I had no product to sell. There was nothing, and I never leveraged my name to try to, get a product going. And the reason that I did that is I was like, it's just going to be another Me Too product, right? Like I can point people to an established flat pedal that's going to be just as good as anything that I can come out with. And why like flood the market with something else that's, already out there, or, add to a flooded market. And so what happened though is I had this idea for a pedal, and my insight was I was on my bike and I was riding, and I was wondering, like, man, why don't I need stiff-soled shoes in the gym, right? Like, why can I go in the gym and lift barefoot and lift all this weight, and my foot is strong and stable, but I get on my bike and my foot turns into this weak, unstable mess? Like, why is that? And I had this like insight, right? This like freaking voice just says, it's because the ground supports both ends of your arch. And man, that right there has just led me down this giant rabbit hole of understanding about how the foot works and how to apply that knowledge to the pedal, and all of the differences that a proper application of these principles makes, right? And so your foot has an arch, right? And like any other arch, it's one of the most stable forms in nature, but only if both ends are properly supported. If you destabilize one end of an arch, the entire thing falls apart. It becomes a mess, right? So you need a stable, and this is why we use stiff-soled shoes, right? Because there's this thought process that like we need to push through the ball of our foot when we're pedaling, because it's like running or walking, or people use it like things like, you create the most power that way, like Olympic lifters push through the ball of their foot, right? There's all these analogies that people use as to like why you need to push through the ball of your foot when you're pedaling. And so every pedal, clipless pedals, flat pedals, all of them are designed with this basic premise that like you really only need one side of your arch to be supported by the pedal, and being able to apply pressure into the pedal through one end of your arch alone, right? And so you may not have the ball of your foot directly over the spindle, because by this point most people have realized that that's really uncomfortable, right? Like, and it's very tough on your Achilles tendon, puts a lot of stress, super long lever arm.
And your calf.
And so, yeah, exactly, yep. So most people will at least like cheat their contact point up a little bit, right? And so, but you still have just basically the ball of your foot being supported by the platform, right? And so this is why you need stiff-soled shoes, because your arch is basically hanging in space, unsupported. So one entire end of the arch is unsupported. So, well, if I use a stiff-soled shoe to go out and create some stiffness under the arch, that helps stabilize the arch, but it doesn't fix the problem, right? And so one of the problems is that when you are, so let's say that you have a platform, right? And it's centered on a rotating axis, okay? So we've got a platform centered on a rotating axis. Now I need to apply force into this platform. From an engineering perspective, what's going to be the most efficient way to do this? One pressure point that I have to try to perfectly align over the middle to keep things stable. And if I get that pressure point off center even a little bit, it creates uneven pressure, which starts to tip the platform forward, right? That's what happens with this ball of the foot, right? We have one pressure point. If it's not directly over the axle, any forward movement of that pressure point is going to create a tipping force. It's going to create instability in the platform. Well, this is going to cause your foot to want to come off the pedal, right? And so, well, one answer to this problem is, well, let's strap our foot to the pedal. Okay, so we're creating unstable forces, which is creating an unstable platform. So let's just strap our foot to this unstable platform. Okay, well, that's what toe straps and eventually clipless pedals were doing, is strapping your foot to an unstable platform. Okay, that's one answer. That's one answer, potential answer to the question. Well, what's another one? Well, how about if we have two pressure points and we're applying that pressure on both ends of the platform? Yeah, that's going to create way more stable energy. It's going to allow us to change the platform by applying more pressure to one side versus the other. It's going to create the potential of a stable platform as you're applying pressure. So if you were to go to an engineer and you were to present him with this problem, there's not a single engineer in the world that would tell you a single pressure point is a better solution than a double pressure point when you're trying to apply force into a platform that's centered on a rotating axis. But that's what we do in mountain biking. Like from an engineering perspective, this solution makes no sense at all, right? So this was my insight, is that we're creating an unstable forces going into the pedal. We're creating an unstable arch. We're totally screwing up the whole thing with this single pressure point theory that we have, whether it's a flat pedal or a clipless pedal. They're all designed with this single pressure point theory. So my idea and why I had to create my own pedal was because there's no other pedal on the market that does this, and no other pedal company out there that would do this, because the whole like ball of the foot thing is so ingrained in our psyche, you know, the need to like, you're athletic when you're on the ball of your foot, right? Like you don't want to be flat footed. There's like all this stupid nonsense that people spout about why you need to be on the ball of your foot, either for creating power or being athletic and being able to move. And they all come from a misunderstanding of what is going on here with how like your foot is pressing into a platform and it doesn't come off that platform, right? So it's not like running or walking. Even Olympic lifters, if you've ever Olympic lifted before, you know that they're actually like jumping off the ground. Like they are breaking contact with the ground. So like Olympic lifters are jumping off the ground for a split second and then stomping their feet back down to catch the weight. But it's just the reason they're pushing off the ball of their foot is because they're actually breaking contact with the ground. If you break contact with the ground, you need to push through the ball of your foot. If you're not breaking contact with the platform that you're on, you want to keep both ends of your arch in contact. This is why in the gym you lift through both ends of your arch. You press through the heel and the ball of the foot. You don't come up on the ball of the foot when you're doing squats and deadlifts, because that's not how the foot works, right? And so this misunderstanding of how the foot works, and then applying that misunderstanding to the problem of how do we apply pressure into the pedal, and then that misunderstanding creating all these problems, and then us trying to fix these problems is what's led us where we're at, right? So if we just back up and you just create a stable platform, right? So that's what the Catalyst pedal does. Is it's you know, the Catalyst, the regular size one, we got a regular size one and we got an XL, right? It's the only pedal that's actually made with larger dudes in mind. But it's the regular one has 5 inches of contact space from front to back. It's no wider than a normal pedal, right? And so it disappears under your foot. There's nothing that's sticking out underneath your foot when you're standing on it. But from front to back, you have enough space to stand on it and get pressure on both ends of your arch, right? So basically you get a midfoot position. And so the midfoot position that this pedal allows creates more stable energy going into the pedal, right? Your foot's not tipping forward. Like I can jump on Catalyst pedals in flip-flops and fucking sprint down the street in you know, and not worry about my feet coming off, right? Like most people would not feel confident in flip-flops sprinting down the street on their flats because you feel like your feet are going to fly off the pedals. And so and you also have no power, right? Because your heel's like in space, because the platform itself is creating the platform, or I'm pushing into the platform itself. I don't need a stiff sole shoe, right? Like I could actually jump on those pedals in my Vans and ride really well because I'm not relying on my shoe to provide stability. The pedal itself is providing stability. And then I don't have to worry about this forward tipping. I don't have to worry about my foot trying to fly off the pedal because I've got stable energy that's pressing down, right? Like if I'm trying to crush a can, right? Like I'm not going to try to like push on it with the ball of my foot, right? Like I'm going to push on it in the middle, right? Because I want downward energy. And so anyway, so that's what the Catalyst pedal allows. And so this is really kind of a long-winded way to get to the answer to your question, which is that I believe that if you fix the problem of stable energy and stabilizing the arch with a flat pedal, that the utility of flat pedals extends much more, right? Like I think that you could always make an argument in certain situations where clipless pedals could potentially be better. But just to give you an example, we have people that triathletes who use the Catalyst pedal. And what they found is that their times are significantly faster because they're not losing any time on the riding portion, right? Like they're not slower on their bikes. And then when they get off their bikes, their running times are faster because they don't have the Frankenwalk thing. Like one, they don't have to change shoes, right? Like they can ride in the shoes that they run in. And then they don't have to, you see like triathletes after the ride and they start running and they've got this little like the stiff walk, right? Because their Achilles tendons and calves and everything are so stiff from the riding. It takes them a little bit to get going with their running, but because you're not using your calf and Achilles tendon to stabilize the back end of the arch, the pedal's doing that. You're able to jump off and you've got like a relatively fresh foot to start running on. And so, again, I think that a lot of people, if they try to pedal that stabilize their foot properly, would find that they could perform like at a really, really, really high level with flat pedals. They can perform at a high level with flat pedals, period. Right. So I think that any average rider, right, like going back to that, like, do you pay your mortgage or do you have the potential to represent your country or something like that with your riding? Then if that's part of the conversation, then clipless pedals may be part of the conversation as well. But if that's not you and you're just a rider who likes to ride, you do it for fun, maybe you race recreationally, like I don't think that you have any business on clipless pedals because you can reach your performance potential on flat pedals. And especially if you have a flat pedal that stabilizes your foot properly and doesn't have some of the issues that normal flat pedal design does. So not to turn this into like a giant plug for the Catalyst pedal, but it is, I believe, like I said, like just all of my research and all of my insights and everything about flat pedals and human movement and just all of these things just led to this weird insight that I had that has just led me down this rabbit hole. And like I said, when you peel back the layers, you start to realize like how much of what we think about pedal stroke and pedals and shoes really comes from this problem of like a single pressure point system creating unstable energy into the pedal and also creating unstable, an unstable arch. And then that problem has to be fixed in some way. It's just, there's two ways to fix it. And so right up until this point, the bike industry has pursued one path, which is to stick with that single pressure point design and just try and design shoes and pedals and everything to optimize it. But if we step back and say, well, what if we just created a platform that stabilizes everything? What would happen then? So anyways, yeah, not sorry for the tangent on that, but I don't know if that answers your question, but I do believe that flat pedals actually have a role in road riding. Again, we get a lot of people that ride, that road ride on our pedals. And so, yeah, we've gotten some pretty interesting trikes, recumbent bikes, like I said, triathlons, BMX. Just there's a lot of pretty much if it's a bike, then flat pedals have a role to play in that activity. And especially even if it's not something that's traditionally thought of as being flat pedals, right? Like no one ever rides flat pedals in triathlons. It's not even thought of as an option.
And nobody ever rides clipless pedals on beach cruisers or townies.
No, yeah, it's true.
Well, let me give the frame of reference how we kind of got started on this topic with our original podcast, and I think you touched on several things that'll definitely help us fill up all this vacant airspace since nobody's talking here. And I'll say this on the front end. I'm gonna take the devil's advocate position in some of this conversation and not
surprised.
Not to art. Yeah, I know. Does that shock you, Brad?
No.
But okay,
that's kind of my personality too, so I can appreciate.
So
that.
here's where we came from. Brad and I were talking about. I'm building up a new single speed mountain bike. My first new mountain bike in a number of years. Definitely, you've had some very strong influence on the mountain bike community around here. I'm assuming everywhere. I'm not dialed in with mountain biking nationwide, but definitely, I think it's kind of shifted the the perspective on flat versus clipless, I think it's actually gone the other way now, where more people are very passionate on the flat side and bashing the clipless side of things. So when I was telling Brad about that I'm building a new mountain bike, it's like, well, here's some things I'm going to do with it, because I don't want to be that boomer, stay off my lawn guy. Hey, I'm going to try a dropper post. I've ridden for years without a dropper post. I don't have anything against dropper posts, but I don't think you need to ride a dropper. It's not a necessity to ride a bicycle. People out there now, you have to have a dropper post. No, you can still ride a bike without a dropper post. But hey, I'm going to try a dropper post to see how much different it is. And I'm not saying it isn't going to be. I expect it to be a better ride. Modern geometry. I'm looking forward to trying modern geometry. But hey, you can still ride a mountain bike trail on a bike made in 2010, believe it or not. Lots of people don't believe that right now. And then flat pedals. So for me personally, that's probably, no, I am not the proponent of, well, you got to have the flat pedal so you can have the power on the upstroke. That's bogus bullshit. I think everybody pretty much knows that now. Where I was coming from a perspective wise, and you touched on it from the marketing angle, in my opinion. I mean, for me to switch all of my bikes away from Crank Brothers, it's going to be $1,000, $1,500 in pedals I'm going to have to buy, quite frankly. Yeah, I know. Brad and I have had this discussion before. I'm one of those few people that actually got lucky and only had one set of Crank Brothers pedals fail on me. And but outside of that, and which was also the reason I didn't change. It's like, I was seeing the failure rate they were having. But the reason I went clipless back in the day, you've touched on it, was the stability aspect of it, keeping my foot on the pedal. And a bunch of the things you talked about there a little bit ago that I find interesting, I really want to hear your perspectives on this. Brad and I were coming at it from the flat versus clipless perspective specifically, but you're coming into even a narrower perspective on a proper application of a flat pedal, it sounds like. Am I correct in that summation?
Yeah. I would say that there are, in general, the more of a midfoot position that you can ride or put your foot in, like the better you're going to be able to tap into all those things that I was talking about. And so there are some pedals that allow you to get close, but there wasn't anything that really allowed you to get a true midfoot position where you had the midpoint of your arch over the axle and you were able to apply pressure on both ends of the pedal. And so that's what my theory is, and the theory behind the Catalyst pedal is that adding that extra length, there's a critical mass. There's a point where all of a sudden you're able to stabilize the arch, and it completely changes what's happening with the pedal and the foot and everything like that. And until you get to that point, because I did some experimenting, because I was like, man, if I'm going to sink money into this project, I need to make sure that like this extra inch, right, is going to really make a difference. Is it really going to make that big of a difference, right, before I go and like sink a bunch of money into starting a company?
I've been told another inch would be great, but that's a different topic.
Well, always, yes, yeah. So, but there's always a cost to benefit ratio for anything. In my experiments, I found that was the sweet spot, or like I said, with the design. But yes, that is a way to look at it. Is I think that the design of the flat pedal could be improved. Although I still think that like flat pedals are going to be generally better for people than clipless pedals if you can't just get what you like. But yes, I think that for people that are looking for a little bit more stability, a little bit more grip, a little bit more maybe feel like they're having trouble keeping their feet planted on the pedals when they're trying to do technical moves or going through rock gardens or drops and stuff. All of those things, I believe, before you think, well, I need to switch to clipless pedals to cure this problem, that if you tried a platform that stabilized your foot, what I think is properly, that you may find that also clears up some of those issues. So if you're riding a pair of flats and you don't have any issues, like, fine. But if you might have some issues, or you're coming from clipless and you want to kind of maximize your experience, I guess I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, from my logic oriented brain and the way it works, what you're describing there actually makes from again my devil's advocate perspective, that makes a much more solid argument than just a flat pedal in general. I understand what you're talking about, the different physical application of power and weight distribution. That's a fundamental difference. Whereas before, I went clipless because I was on flats and I was tearing up my shins and I was falling off the bike and I was racking my balls sliding onto the top tube and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I went clipless to begin with. It wasn't for a power on the upstroke sort of thing. And again, from the very good job that you and like-minded people have done promoting flat pedals over the past decade or so, at least again around North Texas, it's newer riders. That's it. It's flat pedals only. They don't even consider clipless. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I also see those guys they're posting pictures of their shins all shredded up and that they aren't riding properly and they aren't staying on the pedal. And that, I think you would do well to help share that other end of the message more. Logically it makes sense. And basically I'm sold on trying your setup when I do build up this bike and go with those pedals myself. Not saying that you've sold me that it's going to work, but this makes sense to me logically. I'm gonna feel better about trying a true flat pedal. That's I recognize as a fundamental difference. So that part I'm excited by just after this initial conversation that we've had so far. But then along those lines, my first thought process is, doesn't that affect the fit of the bike? So am I changing my saddle height? Am I changing my cockpit length? Walk me through that. Are there any differences going with that center placement on the foot?
Yes, well, actually, it does change things. And so if you think about your hips are your center of gravity, right? And so, roughly, right, like our belly button, I know it's actually a little, below that and in, but
mine's
it's like,
way
so
out
you can
here,
look at like your belly button, right? So, but you can look at like generally like your hips or belly button as your center of gravity. And so, and then your bike has a center of gravity, which is roughly somewhere around the bottom bracket. Right. And so a lot of what's happening on the bike, pretty much everything that's happening on the bike is the relationship between your center of gravity and the bike center of gravity plays an important role. And so when you're on the ball of your foot, that is going to push your center of gravity back and up.
Yep.
Right. Especially if you're trying to push through, you're trying to like push down, right, as we're told to, right? So that's gonna create your push your center of gravity back and up, which is going to create a less stable position. The closer your center of gravity is to the bike center of gravity, the more stable you are, right? That's why, instinctively when things get, you want to have the seat down, right? So you can get your hips down, get low, having your, people instinctively, shrink and to stabilize themselves is because you're trying to get your center of gravity in closer to the bike center of gravity, right? And so so when you change to the midfoot position, you will have to move your seat down and forward some. And so that will, again, how much that is, it's going to depend on, leg length and stuff like that. In general, I just say find what's comfortable, right? Because the other thing that getting a good pedal that stabilizes your foot properly does, it changes standing pedaling. Right. So now when you stand up to pedal, instead of feeling like your feet are going to fly off the pedals and it's kind of this unstable position that's, not super easy to maintain. Now it feels like you're on a Stairmaster, right? Like you're standing on planks. And so it's not as fatiguing. You're able to apply power better. And so one of my basic things that I try to get people to do, because along with flat pedals, I also have MTB strength training systems. So strength and conditioning stuff, and then how to apply strength and conditioning stuff to mountain biking was my first thing that I did, and is what kind of led me down this pathway. But it's better for your body, right? Like you're able to get full extension with your knees, right? And so you're able to, when you're standing up, you have with that full extension, because you have pressure at your knees, it actually creates a co-contraction that stabilizes your knee in a way that you don't get when you're sitting down, right? And so what I suggest riders do is that you want to stand up for your hard efforts, right? Hard climbs, hard sprints. Anytime you have high tension, right? If you have a lot of tension running through the body, then you want to try to stand up, because that's a better platform to apply tension to, right? And so when you're sitting down, that's a bad position, man. Like sitting down is a turd, right? It's you can't get your glutes into it. Your core's not activated. Your spine's not in a good position. You can't get full extension of your knees. You're not getting that co-contraction between the quad and the hamstring to stabilize the knees. It's not a great position for us from a movement standpoint. So what you want to do is use that for your low tension efforts, because you're not going to hurt yourself just spinning down the street an easy effort, right? Like the things that cause problems for us are high tension efforts, like when that hard climb or hard sprint, right? And you're sitting in the saddle and you're like crunched down in this, adult fetal position, and you're just laying high levels of tension on this crappy posture and this crappy position that your body's in. That's what leads to a lot of overuse injuries and problems that people have from riding, is overuse of seated pedaling. And so if you stand up to pedal more, then you're going to put yourself in a anatomically just functionally much better position. And so you're going to incur a lot less of these overuse injuries and stuff. And so the reason I bring that up is because I personally think that for mountain biking, especially, like bike fits can be a little overrated, because if you are, as soon as you stand up, that whole bike fit goes out the window, right? That's, so the bike fit is only it's only useful when you're sitting down, right? And so if you are using seated pedaling as your go-to for everything, and you're avoiding standing pedaling like the plague, then yeah, you probably need a bike fit, because you got to figure out how to optimize this crappy position you're in, right? But if you are standing up more, then you don't need to optimize this crappy position, because you're not using it in a way that's going to create problems. And so find what's comfortable, find what allows you to move well, find what allows you to apply your skills properly, and then go with that, right? And then stand up for the hard stuff, and you don't have to worry about a bike fit. So the reason I say that is because some people who have this like bike fit, well, what's the measurements, right? They want to know, like, well, what measurement or what formula or what do I use to determine my new seat and saddle position when I change to this midfoot position? And, my answer is like, man, just find what's comfortable, right? Like if it's comfortable for you and it's not causing pain, it's not causing problems, then like it's fine, right? And like I said, if you're standing up more, then you're not going to have to worry about overuse injuries as much, because you're not laying tension on this crappy position that is seated pedaling. So, but like I said, so you will change. You will have to lower your seat a little bit. You will have to bring your seat forward some. And what that's actually going to do is pull your center of gravity in closer to the bike center of gravity. So it actually creates a more stable overall position for you on the bike when you do this. So, but yes, it does make an impact. But in my experience and the feedback that we've gotten, the impact is the change that people make is actually positive, because they find that they feel overall more stable on the bike, getting their seat down and in some.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've always been one of those that said that there's a lot more leeway on the mountain bike side of things around bicycle fit to begin with, because I mean, you're sliding fore and aft all the time, you're standing up, you're shifting over, all that good stuff.
Yep.
You're probably not familiar with us. I mean, the events that I put on are We do mountain bike events. We do endurance mountain bike events. But the vast majority of the stuff we do is gravel oriented, ultra endurance gravel oriented.
Cool.
What's your experience around gravel riders using your pedals right now?
Just similar to like the road riders and the triathletes. I mean, we definitely have people who are using it for them. Like bike packing is another.
Makes a lot of sense for bike packing.
Yeah, things. And everyone who uses them is like, man, I get made fun of, but I'm not giving them up because like my feet feel better than they've ever felt. My niggling little pain in my ankle or knee or lower back is gone. Like we literally have doctors and physical therapists who recommend this pedal to their patients because it will take care of a lot of cycling related pain, because the pain comes from having an unstable foot and just all of the issues that are created around that. Right. And so once you stabilize the foot properly, you're taking pressure off of the Achilles tendon and the ankle and the knee and the low back. Like all of it aligns up better.
But you're engaging more muscle groups instead of isolating too, right?
Well, you're able to use your hips properly, right? Because one of the things we're told in the gym is, well, you got to be able to drive through your heels. If you see someone coming up on their toes, you may cue them to push your heels into the ground, right? But like we want pressure through the heel because the pressure at the heel allows activation of the hips. Right? If you don't have pressure at the heel, your hips, your glutes basically aren't able to activate as strongly. They're not able to flex as strongly as if you have pressure and support under the heel. So it does allow you to change. Like you will feel the muscles that you're using in your legs actually change with this. That's one of the feedback we get again is like people actually start to feel their glutes and their hamstrings. It's not all just like on the quads and the knees. So it does distribute that out better. But yeah, we definitely have had people who've used the gravel stuff. It's funny, man. I like the gravel niche because it's interesting. Like I had an article long time ago where I said, look, like there's people who like to go out and just ride dirt roads. They just like to go out and ride on gravel roads. Right? That's not mountain biking. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? I don't mean that in a dirty way. I mean like their needs.
It's a different discipline. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right. There's a lot of similarities, right? Like 80% of it is going to be similar, right? But man, I've received so much pushback, like 10 plus years ago when I suggested like we need a third category. Right? We've got road riding, we've got mountain biking. We need a third category because when someone tells me they're mountain biking, I assume they're doing X. And then I find out that they're doing this, what turns out to be gravel riding, right? What's kind of turned into the gravel niche. Yeah, we've got this niche and it's cool.
So
I like
some
it.
of the stuff you've touched on, particularly around the Achilles and things like that, and the calf strains and so forth. So like one of our events we do, we call it the Rat 1000. It's 1,000 miles across Texas, primarily dirt and gravel roads, a little bit of rails to trails. Obviously, you got to throw some pavement in the mix, but there's people that knock it out in 5 or 6 days. One of their biggest hurdles are Achilles overuse issues. It would be fascinating to see how the midfoot approach, because that's the first thing we tell everyone: slide your cleats all the way back. Try to get as close to midpoint. That's the best recommendation we can give anyone already. Does the flat pedal / midpoint approach, does that change? I mean, I recognize it's a fundamental pedal difference on the mountain bike side. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I get that, and definitely the more standing for the higher impact stuff makes sense. If I'm just spinning for 1,000 miles, and I'm used to spinning at 75 RPM, let's say, real low, real low watts, just spinning it. If I switch to something like what you're talking about, first from the flat pedal, but then from the mid pedal design, does that affect your cadence any, or does that affect your power use, or using the different muscle groups? Is that a different approach? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a good question. In general, you're going to find that you're not going to be able to spin as high of an RPM. So if you're used to spinning like 120, 130, 100, plus RPM. That's really hard to do if your foot's not attached to the pedal. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, it's just you're just moving so fast that it's hard to keep pressure. And so at lower RPMs, you're not going to see much of a change, right? And so the thing is, if you think about it, right, like, so what do we want? We want power, right? Like we're trying to create power, and power is force times speed, right? And so the more force you're able to create, the less speed you need to create the same amount of power, right? And so when you have there's a lot of clipless pedal, especially when the real small pedals that have barely any platform that you're actually in contact with, and you are relying on the sole of the shoe to provide support, you're really limited with how much pressure you can apply, because even the stiffest carbon sole is going to have some flex, right? And so you reach a point where you can't actually put more pressure into the pedal, so you have to go faster. If you want to create more power, your only answer is to go more faster. Or go faster, more faster. And so that's where you find the high RPM spinning coming in. And so, but at a slower, when you can create more force, right? So if you have a platform that allows you to create more force, you can create the same amount of power at a slower RPM. And that's what people have found, is that actually at slower RPMs, like the 75 you're talking about, man, I'd imagine that you guys would actually be more efficient. You'd probably find you're producing more power at 75 RPM with these pedals with the same amount of effort, just because you're going to have more force that's actually going down into the pedal stroke and less energy that's lost in the forward tipping, just kind of unstable energy that's created with the single pressure point design. And so, that would be my theory on it. But I will say the feedback that we've gotten and the stuff that I've seen myself is that at slower RPMs, there's no problem. The only I guess feedback / complaints that we've had are from people who are used to spinning, like I said, like 120, 130 RPM. And we've had to explain to them, like, you really don't have to spin that fast with this platform, because you're able to create the same amount of power at a slower RPM because of the higher force you're able to create. But yeah, I'd say like that 75, 80, RPMs, like you're not going to notice any difference. It's not going to affect your cadence, but you will just find that every pedal stroke that you're putting down, more force is going to go down into the pedal stroke, and less force is going to be lost with the forward tipping instability that you get from that single pressure point.
Yeah, I mean, and just to make it clear, when I mentioned that RPM, I'm a masher. So, and again, I'm building a single speed. So I'm not a spin it to win it type guy. You're never going to see me spinning at 120 RPMs. But definitely once you start getting to the pointy end of the gravel field, it is, the spin it to win it crowd, and they are high cadence riders, typically speaking, with very low power. Yeah, it's higher revolutions at a lower power to get the same overall wattage. Basically, I'll go ahead and stand up and mash at 60. I'm fine with that.
Same.
Man,
I have a question.
You've covered a lot of ground. Yeah, please do, Brad. I'm blown away by all this.
James, how much coffee have you had this morning, buddy? You are fired up.
I had one cup. Actually worked out right before this, too.
I do have a serious question, though. So let's say I'm a listener right now. Let's steer them towards your website. It's Pedaling Innovations, right? That's where they can find all your pedals.
Pedalinginnovations.com.
Yeah, your testimonials are on there, your reviews, all your models are on there, all the nitty gritty that they want and everything. But my question is, and I was looking through your website and I didn't see where this was addressed, but I'm a clipless guy, and okay, I'm sold. I want flat pedals. What in general have you found? Is there like a learning curve? I mean, I know that, most people think, well, shit, I rode flat pedals for 10 years before I went to clipless. I can get back on flat pedals and immediately be right back at home. But we're so ingrained in that clipless momentum or motion, if you will, and that locked in, the isolation of those muscle groups. There has to be an inherent learning curve. And I don't mean like how to learn how to pedal, but your muscles have to get back adapted to that kind of pedal stroke versus a clipless, almost a dumb position, right?
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question because that is again one of the big obstacles that we face in getting people to switch to flats is there is going to be a dip, right? There is going to be a dip in your performance. And so, how long that's going to be, what is it going to be like? That's a concern that a lot of riders have because, they don't want to feel like they're going to be out there just hating riding for like 6 months, right? Like nobody wants to deal with that, right? And so flat pedals in general, I have found that in 4 to 6 weeks that you will be like 90+% where you were on clipless pedals.
Okay.
And within like 2 weeks, I would say within a couple weeks of using flats, you're going to feel like way more comfortable on them, right? So you go out on your first ride and, it just feels kind of weird. You feel like your feet are kind of coming off the pedals. You can't keep them planted. This climb that you usually have no problem with, you find yourself spinning out on, right? And so it's like, well, crap, what is this? How long is this going to last? And so there is going to be that, like it may take, a few rides. Your second ride out is going to be better, right? Like
sure.
That's the thing is like, you're going to improve every time. It's going to get a little better every time. But for most people within 2 weeks, they're getting really comfortable on flat pedals. And within 4 to 6 weeks, they are really comfortable. They're like, okay, why didn't I do this sooner? Sort of comfortable. And so I do think that, especially if you're just coming from clipless pedals, and so, man, there's a lot of riders, because again, you mentioned that like now new riders go on flat pedals, right? It's not even a question. And I think, when we came up, it was a different story. Like I was told when I got a mountain bike, you want to get on clipless pedals as quickly as possible because you're going to have to learn to use them at some point.
Yeah.
So you may as well start now. That was what I was told. That's what everybody else was told. I got put on some, clipless pedals. I never got comfortable in them. I had an incident where I fell over at a stop sign and I knew I had to get unclipped. And I was like, man, I would have died if this was the trail. And so I just, went to flats and so that was my, I just stuck with flats, right? I was like, well, I'm having more fun with this. And so that was my experience. But a lot of people just stuck it out, right? Like they had that first crash at a stop sign, and my experience was, screw this, I'm just going to use flats until I feel like, I really need clipless. A lot of people just stuck with clipless and they stuck it out, right? And so there's a lot of people who've ridden for, 10, 15 years and they never rode flats. Like they've been on clipless pedals their entire mountain biking career. And man, that can be a little bit rougher of a transition than someone who spent a few years on flats, then switched to clipless for a few years, and now they want to go back to flats, right? There's definitely going to be a difference in the learning curve and the transition with that. And so you just need to keep that in mind, that like if you have no experience at all on flat pedals on a mountain bike, you may be closer to that 6 week end of things, right? But like if you're coming, if you rode a BMX as a kid and you had a bunch of flat pedal experience as a kid, and then you got in a mountain bike, like I said, like you may find that transition happens a little faster.
Sure.
But yeah, I would say that like I said, somewhere in that 4 to 6 week mark, but definitely within the first few rides, you're going to feel better. But there are people, again, I don't want to turn this into just a crazy plug for the Catalyst pedal, but I do think that the Catalyst pedal speeds that learning curve up quite a bit. And again, we've had people that have switched from clipless to Catalyst pedals, and they're like, man, within a couple weeks, I was literally riding stuff I've never ridden before, that I was, technical stuff that I was too scared to ride in my clipless pedals, and I'm just flowing right through it on these things. And so again, that you may again, like flat pedals are great, but if you start running into some of those issues, that Kevin was talking about earlier, right? Like stability problems, feet staying on, right? Until you feel the need to like rush back to clipless pedals to fix those problems, there may be another solution that can help, that will that actually works better for your body potentially. But yeah, that's a good question, man. So yeah, like I said, like 4 to 6 weeks is a good kind of time frame to think about.
And the other question I had was, I remember, like I said, this was before you even had this idea of your own pedal in your head. You were just advocating for the merits of flat pedals at the time, but you made it a point to tell me that the shoe was almost as important as the pedal at that point, because you want something that is going to grip the pedal, pretty well. And that's like one of the reasons I got the 510, because they had the stealth rubber, and that contact point is pretty tremendous, especially from a transition from clipless to a flat pedal. It's because even with the catalyst, you have, I think it's 18 pins per side or something like that. You have a lot of...
Yeah, it's like 14 or something, yeah.
You have a lot of contact there,
yeah.
But if you have... I mean, not that anybody would do this, but if you try to ride it with a loafer, it's not going to be as effective. You want something that is going to have a sole that's going to grip it, but also isn't going to get shredded by those pins. So, and I heard you earlier say, you could hop on with your Vans and stuff, but do you still think that the shoe is as important? Or is it less important now that you have such a big, stable platform?
Yeah, no, again, great question. And it's always important, right? The shoe's always important. It's just what do we need from the shoe? And so, the stealth rubber, man, I still remember the original Intense shoes that came out. They were freaking bright orange and blue. And like they were the first 510 sticky rubber shoes. And they changed the game. Again, it's so funny, man, thinking like there's people that came that, if they've been riding for less than 5 years, like they just have no idea, right? There's whole like just moments in the mountain biking industry and world that they weren't there for, right? There is a moment in time before sticky rubber and after sticky rubber, right? And sticky rubber completely changed people's experience and the utility, excuse me, of flat pedals. And so, but again, if you think about, well, what did we need from a shoe? Right. Well, I needed a shoe that would potentially provide some support for my heel, and so that's where, like, the like you said, like the Sam Hills and some of the heavier duty shoes have a stiffer sole, a thicker sole, and then you need something that's going to help keep your foot from flying off the pedal with all that forward rotation that's happening. Right. And so that's what the sticky rubber did, was basically help. That's why if you were trying to ride flat pedals in normal shoes, you would really struggle, because you needed something to help mitigate that forward pressure, the forward tipping pressure.
Right.
And so that's what sticky rubber did. And that's why like stealth rubber and 510, have owned the market, because they have the best rubber for that need. And it's been, really tough for other shoe companies to match that level of performance. And unfortunately, the shoes that actually go on the rubber soles have kind of gotten lower in quality over the years, but everybody tolerates it because that stealth rubber is money, right? And so, but what I found was that, again, when you fix the problem of that unstable energy and you're using the platform itself, right? Like our foot, it works better if we're standing on something that's stable rather than having something stable strapped to our foot, right? Like that sounds the same, but they're fundamentally different things, right? And so like having a stiff sole is not the same thing as having a platform that's supporting your foot. And so having a platform that supports your foot takes away the need for that stiff sole. And because I don't have that crazy forward tipping motion, I don't need the super sticky rubber to hold me in place. And so I personally ride like kind of foot healthy shoes. That is another problem I found with the 510s, is as I got more into the barefoot training movement, like, man, their shoe fit is not good, right? Like the shape of their shoes is not really foot healthy. And it's as I started wearing like better shoes and going barefoot more, I found that when I wore my 510s that my feet would start cramping up, and I would really struggle with just the shape and size of the shoe. And so now I wear, it's a company out of Montrose, which is not too far from where I live in Fruta, that makes a shoe called, or makes shoes, the company's called Sense of Motion. And they make a really good athletic shoe that has a sticky sole that's sticky enough to provide some friction. Again, you don't want, like you said, like loafers wouldn't work because they have a stiff, like the sole is like hard, right? There's nothing to sink onto the pins. So you still want something that's soft enough to sink onto the pins and provide some friction. But you don't want, so like something that's too stiff isn't going to work. But we don't want something, like you said, that's so soft that you end up like tearing the shoes apart. And that was, again, a problem with the 510s is like you tear the soles apart because if you got that really soft rubber, it gripped great. But man, like they'd barely get through a season before you had just like ripped the soles to shreds.
I got to stop you here, James. I got to stop because I'm sorry. I got to get this out before it leaves my head. All right, you're really into probably what's been a huge pain of mine for adventure cycling. I want to hear what your solution is before I forget to ask this. This is like so top of mind for me now.
Yes.
All right, multi-day, bike packing, all that good stuff. It's always been a pain in the ass to pack camp shoes and bike shoes and all of that. So, what's the perfect pedal do everything while you're bike packing or going on a 2-week adventure with your pedals? And I'm having to scramble up mountains and cross creeks and deal with mud and all this. What's the perfect shoe or boot for that right now?
What would you wear if you
I would
weren't riding a bike?
I would wear my Keen hiking boots.
There you go.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, I mean, again, the more of a lug that a shoe has, the more you may run into problems with like the pins kind of floating in the space between the lugs.
I get it.
Right, and so that's just that. But again, like any shoe that you find comfortable to wear would be a good shoe to use with this pedal.
You're a hell of a salesman. Yeah,
again, you got to think about your needs and the context and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, like I wear, if that would be my answer is like, what do I want to wear off of the bike? And then that's what I'm going to wear on the bike. Right. Like, and if we have, because if it's good for your foot off of the bike, it should be good for your foot on the bike.
Sure.
Like that was my original thought, right? Like, why is there this weird disconnect where we have this whole world off of the bike where we have, this is what's healthy and good for my foot. But then we get on the bike and we do these really weird things that don't actually match up with what we do off of the bike, right? Like you try to walk around in a stiff sole shoe, like you are immobile in a stiff sole shoe off of the bike, right? Like you watch people try to walk around in their really stiff sole shoes. They've ridden their road bikes to Starbucks and they're clacking around, right? It's like, if you had to run away right now, you'd be in trouble, right? Because you can't run in those things. Like, and so they're not good for your foot off of the bike. Well, they're not good for your foot on the bike either. And so, again, but the problem is we've been trying to solve this problem that's been created by this misunderstanding of what we need for a platform. And so, again, going back to like where I said, like you peel back the box, right? Man, people think there's like, functional movement experts and, all these like people who are really into like how the human body moves and how do we apply these things to the bike and all these things have been really thought out.
That's
it's like,
the marketing
none
department.
of that takes place. None of that is what.
Yeah.
It's marketing department, exactly. Marketing and research and development, like that. They're if they think that Shimano has a team of sports scientists who are analyzing movement and how to create things that work with that movement, like they're wrong. That's not what they're doing, right? So that was like I said, the insight that I had. Like this is the Catalyst pedal actually applies the things that we know from science and human movement to the problem of pedaling the bike and creating a platform for us to interact with the bike with our feet. And, like I said, so yeah, if it's good for your foot off of the bike, then it should be good for your foot on the bike. And if you have a good pedal that supports your foot properly, then you should be able to swap back and forth without any
That makes sense.
issue.
I do want to make this clear. I did this last time with Ride with GPS as well. I probably should have done this earlier, but hey, James didn't give me an opportunity to, because he has a lot to say. This is not a pedaling innovations, and I'm sorry, I can't even. What's the name of your Catalyst? The Catalyst pedal, right? This is not an infomercial for James's company. We brought him on as an expert to fill in our educational gaps on the topic. So he's not paying us to promote his product and talk him up and say, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, which actually it's starting to sound like it may be from some of the gaps.
He's a great salesman.
I tell you what, you were telling me after you had lunch with him or whatever it was, you were completely sold. It's like, I
literally got up. We were at a cafe right next door to Over the Edge. And at the end of the conversation, I said, fuck it, I'm going to get some pedals. And I walked in and got pedals and shoes that day. And I stuck with it for a while. I don't think I gave it enough time. And I also, I don't know, I feel like the terrain is a little different here, but I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm willing to give it another chance. I was, much like we've alluded to the whole time, I was of the mindset that once you get to a certain level, you just progress into clipless pedals. But I was also, I've been riding since I was 2 years old and worked in bike shops and everything. I was riding flat pedals when clipless pedals were invented, not to age myself too much. But I remember in like 90, 91 working in bike shops when the first SPD pedals came out. And it was like, this is the new hotness. You got to have this. This is the new upgrade. This is like, forget no lean suspension. Now we're on to air suspension. This was the next big thing. And so naturally, I got into clipless pedals, and I've been riding clipless pedals for, 30 plus years. So it kind of became one of those things where I didn't ever think about it another way because I was beyond, flat pedals. I wasn't at that learning range anymore. And then, like I said, you and I had that discussion, and I got on flat pedals for a while, and true to form, I got back to Texas and was ridiculed by all my normal riding buddies, like, what are you, but I am, especially after this conversation, I'm loading a pair of pedals from Pedaling Innovations into my cart, and they're going to get installed on my bike, and I'm going to give them a try. I'm going to go back and try it again with a fresh state of mind. So, especially since I'm not in the business of being fast anymore. I'm just in the business of doing it as often as I can and going as far as I can. So, I think all those things coincide.
Yeah, that's an important consideration, right? Like, that's another thing. Like, I'm 47 now, right? Like, dude, 47-year-old me looks back at, like, 20-something-year-old me, and I'm like, dude, that dude was a madman. Like, I don't know what was wrong with that freaking kid. And, it's so... Your priorities and things change, right? Like, I used to be all about, like, free ride downhill and hitting the gnarliest line and the biggest drop and the biggest jump. And it's like, you crash and you freaking like, okay, everything's still attached. Like, let's go do it again. And, that's just, you can't do that, right, as you get older. So, like, your priorities change. And I think that's another thing, just kind of touching on the industry, right? Like, the industry, it likes to promote young, racing, right? Like young free riders that are able to slopestyle riders, whatever, right? So there's this, I guess, kind of slant towards this type of rider that their goal is different than most riders, right? Like they just have a different goal. So, but then you're sold like, well, all the World Cup downhill racers use flat pedals, which isn't totally true. There's a few that still, or clipless pedals. There's a few that still use flats. But they're like, all the top guys, real World Cup downhill racers use clipless pedals. And it's like, are you a World Cup downhill racer? Right? Like, they have a different goal than you do, right? So if you're 47 and your goal is to do this for a lifetime, then you may find that, like, yeah, there's a point where flat pedals actually start to make more sense for you, just from a I strongly believe that from a movement standpoint, they're way better for your body, and there's just, benefits from a movement standpoint that you're going to get that start to add up as you get older. And so, yeah, like I said, if you're not a freaking, in your early 20s and trying to break onto the, make a living riding, then, your priorities aren't the same as these other riders. And so maybe you don't need to be doing the same training crap that they're doing, right? Maybe you don't need to be on all the same technology that they're using. But yeah, just something else that people need to consider when they're trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do? Like some of these influences that they may not necessarily realize are there.
James, do you find yourself having to defend the Catalyst platform versus traditional platforms for those that are into flat pedals, or is it everybody that's doing flat pedals? Hey, flat pedals are cool no matter what.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, because again, there's a theory, right? It's kind of like, well, why did people get into, clipless pedals? And they get a pet theory as to like why they started riding a certain way. And then if you threaten that pet theory, people get upset, right? And so like I mentioned earlier, there's another side. Like I actually got some pushback from the skills training community that really shocked me when this pedal came out, that I was really fucking surprised. Really surprised at the pushback that I got, because so many people were like, no, you need to be on the ball of your foot. Right? Like this idea that a midfoot position is an unathletic position, and that being on the ball of your foot is an athletic position, and that you need to use your ankles to absorb impact. Right? Like again, that's a rationale that's used. But again, there's this idea that you need to be on the ball of your foot either to use your ankles to absorb impact or because it's a more athletic position. And so, putting people in the midfoot position, you have to explain to people like, well, you're not going to be like flat footed. That's not what being in the midfoot position is, right? It just means that you have 2 pressure points instead of 1. And I can create more pressure on the front end. I can create more pressure on the back end, right? Like my foot's not dead. I can still move my foot, right? And so like like one of the things that people have to do, like if you're going downhill, right? Like a common piece of advice is to drop your heels, right? Like people are told like, drop your heels when you're going downhill. Well, the reason that you're doing that is because you need to get you need to change the angle that you have, right? So that your foot doesn't go flying off the pedal. But you're not really like, you have like either on the ball of the foot or you just drop your heel, right? There's no in between. It's very hard to kind of like stabilize your heel in the middle position, right? And so that's when you have your foot stabilized in the midfoot position, you're able to like, hey, I need to apply more pressure to the back end of this pedal. I need to apply more pressure to my arch, and I'm able to just apply just enough pressure to change the angle of the pedal that I need, right? I don't need to apply more, right? Like I can apply just as much as I need to in order to create the angle that I need to be as stable as I need to be in this position. So I guess my point is that your foot's not dead, right? Like you're not in this flat-footed position that creates an unathletic stance and that people think. But if anything, like one of the things that I learned from doing jiu-jitsu, I got into Brazilian jiu-jitsu about 10 years ago, and it is grappling, right? So it's wrestling. Stand-up is part of it, so you learn some wrestling and stuff as part of that. You learn really quick when you're wrestling that if you see someone go on the ball of their foot, like they can't move, right? Like if you want to change levels, if you want to drop your hips up and down, you have to have both ends of your arch. You have to have at least one foot that has both ends of the arch in contact with the ground. Like if you think about it, right? If I need to squat and I try to get on the balls of my feet and squat, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to change levels in that position. But if I have my foot flat on the ground, I can squat normally. You see with wrestlers, what they'll end up doing is they have one foot flat and one foot will be up as they're moving, right? But you'll never see a wrestler he's up on the balls of his feet, right? Because that's a dude who can't move. That's actually a very unathletic position. So that's the funny thing, is if you understand how the body moves and that it's actually much harder to move your hips in this ball of the foot position, that you're actually creating a less athletic position for us to move from with this ball of the foot position. So, but again, yeah, I have had some pushback, and some people I've had to try to explain that this is not, what's funny is when I was Bike James, the MTB, flat pedal guy and MTB string train systems guy, everybody wrote me off because, oh, he's just a downhill or free rider guy. You don't need to listen to that guy. And then I come out with a pedal, and then they're like, oh, well, that might be good for pedaling, but that's not good for like downhilling and free riding. It's like, what the frick, man? Like, do you really think that I would come out with a frickin' pedal that doesn't let me like move as good, if not better, when I'm downhilling and free riding? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it is so funny how like it's flipped, with people's arguments about why they don't need to listen to me. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Basically, the short version of that is, yes, you're an equal opportunity troublemaker across all disciplines, right?
Dude, unfortunately, holy crap, man. Yeah, for once, I'd like to find a stance where people are like, yeah, buddy, we love you and agree with you on that. It's like, for some reason, I always find myself on the other side of those things, but it's fine. Somebody's got to do it.
I do not want to open up another can of worms, but I do have a question for you. What crank length are you running on your mountain bike right now?
Man, I'm running, I think, like 170, somewhere in there. Like, I to be honest with you, I don't know the exact number. I have not gotten a new bike.
Thank God you didn't say
like
165 or 180. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I do know that there's been a lot more like debate and thought and stuff going into that. I will admit that I have not waded into that or, done much experimenting or anything myself. So here's my thing, like, numbers have power, and you have to be careful what numbers you give power to. Right? So like, does going from like 170 to 165 make a slight difference? Maybe. But does that mean that if I'm on 170 millimeter cranks that I suck? Right? Because then in my mind, I'm like, oh, these cranks are too long. Right? I'm going to hit, you know what I mean? So there becomes like this like mental game. Like, same thing with geometry. If you were to ask me like what geometry I have, I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I know what my bike feels like. I know that I like the way that it feels, but I don't want to be like, okay, I work best with a 67-degree head tube angle. Oh, this bike's got a 65-degree head tube angle. I can't ride this thing. You know what I mean? So I know those things matter, but it's another one of those things that I think a lot of people who really it doesn't matter for them get lost in the weeds on some of these things. So, but again, that's just my opinion. And
what is your go-to daily rider these days?
Oh, my main bike. So I actually have an old Da Vinci Troy. So that's my that was actually my first foray into bigger wheels. I had a Turner RFX was my dude. I love that bike, dude. I still have that frame and look at it every once in a while. I still think that may have been the pinnacle of fucking bikes. That thing would pedal up stuff and just go off of anything. So that thing was just finally getting old enough to where I needed to retire it before it retired itself on me on a jump. And so I was like, I need a new bike, guys. I need a new bike. And so they're like, all right, it's time to upgrade, buddy. You need to get onto a bigger wheel bike. And I'm like, all right, I'll try this 27.5 thing. I don't want to quite go to the 29. And man, the first bike that I went out on, it was a giant something. And I remember thinking to myself, if this is the future of mountain biking, I may have to quit. Like, it rode like shit. It just was terrible. Like, you feel like you're like in between the wheels, right? Like I'm riding in between these wheels, and it takes forever to freaking do anything, right? And I'm like, man, I don't like this. And then I got on the Troy, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, whew, thank God, right? Like, they still make fun bikes. It's not like all big wheel bikes are this like just overly stable thing. And so the Troy I really liked, felt like it rode like a 26-inch wheel bike, but I could feel it roll through a few things a little more smoother, right? But so I still ride that, but I do have an old Cove G-Spot that I pull out from time to time. 26-inch wheels, no dropper post. And dude, the looks I get from people on the trail with that thing are hilarious, because like, dude, most people at this point, like, again, if you've come up in the last 3 3 years or so of mountain biking, like you think it's impossible to ride a bike like that. Like the geometry and the 26-inch wheels, how do you roll it? It's like, dude, like honestly, man, this bike it kicks ass, right? Like the 26 ain't dead. They're still a fun option. But those are my two bikes. The Cove is also kind of my park bike. I don't do nearly as much of that as I used to. But yeah, that's my ride. It's kind of old school. And I do have a dropper post on the Troy.
Where are you located, James? Fruta?
Fruta, Colorado. Yep.
We're going up that way throughout the summer. We do all sorts of gravel and mountain bike events all over Texas and New Mexico and Colorado and Oklahoma. But we're going to be spending a good bit of July and August specifically in Colorado because it's too damned hot in Texas. Brad and I are working on a Colorado trail trip with some friends, but have some other stuff as well. May have to slide out your way. And is there any decent gravel around Fruta?
Yeah, man. I mean, there's I know there's gravel riders around here. I mean, there's just freaking desert roads and
Kevin, if we're in Fruta, we're riding mountain bikes, buddy. You have not ridden unless you've ridden lunch loops.
I'm doing both, but when we call out the Colorado gravel club members, they're not going to want to do the single track. We got to point them to some dirt roads. But when Kevin's out there, he'll be doing. Well, I won't be doing any downhill stuff or anything.
No,
like
but
that.
you need to go you need to go see lunch loops and that whole network of trails and stuff.
That's been on the list for years.
And then what's the other group? James, where is Zippity Doodah?
Yeah.
What's that network of trails?
That's the 18 road trails. That's all the North Fruta Desert is the area. So you got 18 road trails, and you've got the Cocopelli trails, and then you've got the Lunch Loop trails, and then even then like Palisade, which is at the other end of the valley from Fruta, they've put in a bunch of trails around them. Rabbit Valley's got a bunch of trails So there's a bunch of trails.
So is Pedaling Innovations, is that your primary gig or is that a side thing?
No, that's my primary thing right now. I mean, I still do the, bikejames.com is my strength and conditioning site. Cause again, like I'm a fitness coach, right? Like that's what I am. And I just happen to have this idea for a pedal and, had to develop some different skills and resources to bring it to the market. But no, Pedaling Innovations is the main thing. I mean, man, we sell, it's, anywhere between like 150, 200 pairs of pedals a month. So it's not, from like the perspective of like, a Shimano or whatever, like that's nothing, but it's a decent amount of pedals, right? Like I've been doing this for a while, long enough to realize that like, we've managed to grow to an interesting position where we're, actually getting a decent amount of product out to people every month. And so just keeping up with that. But it's a family operation. My wife Kiele is our head of customer service. And then, we got another guy that works for us answering emails. And then my daughter actually handles the fulfillment. So she goes in and packages the pedals and ships them out. So yeah, like I said, it's just been an interesting trip.
Available on the website only, or do you have some retail shops that carry them as well?
We do have a few shops that carry them. The way that we're set up, and again, like dude, you learn so much about the bike industry and business when you start doing this stuff. So you have one of two ways to make money, right? It's like you either sell a shit ton of product, or you develop like a boutique brand that sells like a smaller amount of product and focuses more on customer service and quality and stuff like that. And so we've had to go the route just because of the more of the online route. So we're set up to sell like more direct to customers, but we do have shops that carry our pedals. It's just the thing is we're not able to offer them the margins that they're used to. Again, I've worked in a bike shop, so I know how it works, right? And so, but we have shops that believe in the pedal. You know, they have people that really like it. They got customers that use it. And so we do work with local shops to do what we can to get them into their shops. And so if somebody has a local shop that, you know, they like to, you know, they can contact us and we can see if we can work something out. But yeah, we you know, almost went out of business trying to pursue the, hey, let's get into all these shops and go the volume route. And so we, and there's been a lot of companies, man, it's a cautionary tale. Like there's a lot of companies in the bike industry. I remember Stratos Forks way back in the day, you know, like people don't even know who the hell they were. And at one point they had the best forks in the world. They had the best forks on the market. And then they tried to grow. They tried to make the jump to the next level to be a bigger level, and they lost quality, they lost customer service, and they would go out of business. And so anyways, yeah, that was, you know, kind of a you know, I knew just being in the industry, cautionary tales like that. But so yeah, that's kind of why we've gone the route that we do. But online is the best place to get them. But like I said, we do certainly try to work with shops that do want to support our mission and do what we can to take care of them and get our.
If somebody's on the fence about it and it's like, well, I'm curious, I'm flat pedal curious, but I don't know if I want to take the plunge. Do you have any kind of guarantee or anything like that?
Oh yeah, we got a 90-day money back guarantee. Like no questions asked. Send those things back, beat the shit, and we'll give you your money back. So honestly,
because the website says 30 days.
90 days, man. Yeah, 30 days. Well, I'm saying 90 to the if you're buying this from off of this podcast, you get an extended warranty because Bike Change said so. So I mean, you know, I say that because I've had people contact me after the 30 days, right? Like we put 30 days on there. But the reality is like, you know, we've had people contact us after that. Man, if you don't like the pedals, if they don't work for you, then I don't want to keep your money, right? Like, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this to just take people's money. And I'm doing this because I truly believe that this pedal is a better option and will change people's experience for the better on bikes. And if it does that for you, then awesome. Then it's a fair exchange. Right. And if it doesn't do that for you, then I'm happy to take them back because, I mean, we have people who will buy the used pedals. I can send them out to a shop to use as a demo pair and sell 5 more pedals because of them. So like, I'm not worried about trying to nickel and dime people to death. That's the other thing. Like we've all been on the other end of
Absolutely.
A shitty customer service experience in the bike industry where they've got your money and they don't care anymore. And I wanted to make sure that we did not do that. I hate that feeling. And so I want to make sure that people don't have that feeling when they're dealing with us. But we are the only, there's nothing in the mountain bike industry or cycling industry that I'm aware of that actually offers money back guarantee. Nothing. So we're the only thing out there that offers like a no questions asked. I think there was a grip that came out that offered some sort of money back guarantee, but like you basically had to not use them or put them on and they would take them back. But we've had people send pedals back that have obviously been used, right? Like they're tore up. The pedal bodies have scratches and gouges and they're like, well, I just don't like them. I don't want to use them. That's fine. Cool. I'll take them back. But I was really nervous when I did that because, you know, you don't know, are people going to take advantage of the system or whatever it is. But, you know, people are at heart, man, most people are honest people and they're good people. And so, you know, I don't think we've really had anyone take advantage of us with that, right? Because theoretically you could just send a pair back in 30 days and buy another pair.
Don't give people any ideas.
You know what I mean?
Don't plant those seeds.
But I know. Well, we'll cut you off after 3 times. But yeah, so no, we offer, like I said, a 30-day or 90-day, whatever, man. Just try the pedals. If they don't work for you, let me know. And like I said, well, I'm happy to refund your money. But yeah, I definitely wanted to try to take that, you know, off of people's, you know, trying to make this as low friction as possible to try out. Because I do believe, man, once you try these pedals, you're going to be like, holy crap, like this is better. And
okay.
And then
Brad, unless you got something, I think this is a really good spot. You can't close any better than that for your own commercial.
Man, this could have been a 2-parter.
It's actually, I was just about to say, I'm pretty sure Brad's not blowing smoke. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm trying the pedals now. So I think we need a I think we need a follow-up episode after we've used the pedals for a couple months or something like that. Would you be on board with that, James?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I'm happy to come on and talk about, riding pedals, because whatever.
I literally have a pair of gray pedals sitting in my cart right now. So
I haven't gotten to check out just yet.
Awesome.
All right. Well, James, go ahead and if you would exit out, and like I said, leave that second screen up until it says 100% uploaded. Definitely appreciate your time. This was fantastic.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to our next episode, but I'm also looking forward to when I get out to Colorado to come see you and shake your hand. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolute
man,
pleasure, man. I love your energy, James.
Definitely.
Yep.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I appreciate the platform. I kind of, I didn't want it to turn into a Catalyst pedal commercial, but it's kind of, it's difficult to talk about like what my understanding of flat pedals and the best way to apply pressure and all that stuff. So I appreciate you guys indulging me and
had a great time. Appreciate
talk about that stuff.
Yeah. Just to be fair, though, it wasn't all about Catalyst pedals. This whole thing started with your passion for flat pedals, and it developed into you coming out with your own pedals. So it's not just a tireless pitch. Yeah. It's the actual passion that you have for the movement. So it's understood. But anyways, loved it, man.
Awesome, man. All right. Cool. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you, fellas. And I'll exit out, but yeah, stay in touch.
Later, brother.
We'll talk later. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Man. I knew he was going to be energetic and passionate. But I could not have expected that much information and just the constant flow of it. He is, like I told you, at the end of our conversation that day, I seriously was like, all right, let's do it. I'm going to get some pedals, and that wasn't the intent of his conversation.
No. That's that's the power of passion right there. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm excited. I can't wait to try his pedals, so. But hey, me. If they suck, I'm going to say something about it, but I don't expect that to be the case by any stretch of the imagination. Wow, he wore me out, and I'm just listening, because I think we went 37 minutes before anyone else spoke.
Yeah, and not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. It's an amazing thing. It's an absolutely amazing thing. All right. Anything else we need to cover today, sir?
Man, like you said, I'm my head's still spinning.
No doubt about it. I definitely appreciate that suggestion. I definitely appreciate James hopping on board with us and sharing his message like that. That was a ton of fun. I'm having fun with this stuff. We need to find some more cool guests. I think we're 2 for 2 so far on guests.
Yeah.